Barrie residents have been increasingly participating in public meetings, particularly when it comes to suggesting ideas for public spaces. Last year, residents successfully pressured City Council to withdraw its proposal for an artificial turf at Allendale Station Park. This week, two Barrie residents, Michael Hassey and Rick Webster, submitted a proposal to enhance Sam Cancilla Park, aiming to improve public access to the vibrant downtown area and include public art installations.
Our goal is to spark a discussion about transforming this underutilised waterfront park, especially as plans the city are going to decommission the water reservoir. Sam Cancilla Park, exceptional location on Kempenfelt Bay, makes it a prime opportunity to enhance Barrie's waterfront, yet is currently inaccessible, uninviting, and fails to serve our growing downtown. As downtown intensification continues, quality public spaces are critical. The east side of downtown in particular lacks accessible, high-quality amenity spaces for residents and visitors. The city's strategic plan and Waterford Master Plan prioritises vibrant public spaces. Revitalizing Sam Cancilla Park aligns with these goals and addresses a gap in our infrastructure. The planned decommissioning of the old water reservoir is a catalyst to rethink Sam Cancilla Park. Our concept, developed by Lakehouse Condo residents, envisions a modern, inclusive park that leverages our waterfront. Some of the key aspects that we can see from the plan is to allow pedestrian access directly from Dunlop Street. As we know, the park today, it has a great big slope from the street to the bottom, and it's not accessible. It's very difficult to access the park. We've seen very strong interest from our neighbours and believe this vision reflects the broader residential priorities for a connected, vibrant downtown.
The city has also seen a rise in engagement with its Students' Mayor program, with students becoming involved in municipal affairs at much younger ages. Speaking to Simcoe Community Media, outgoing student mayor Olivia, a fourth grade student, encouraged others to step up and explore the democratic aspects of civil life.
So when I first walked in, I have to be honest, I felt a little bit nervous. But after a little bit, I got used to it, and I'm really happy and excited, and I feel this burst of joy inside whenever I see this place. It was a wonderful experience. That's something I will never forget. To be honest, I didn't really know much about the municipal government when I first walked in, but then I learned that majority of the stuff that happens in our life is decided in the meetings here at City Council. I would say don't stop. It's an amazing experience. It is nerve-wracking at the beginning, but then after, 5 minutes, you get used to it, you feel comfortable, and it feels like the most amazing thing that's happened.
The city is also conducting a ward boundary review and is considering two options. Zachary Spicer, a consultant and expert in municipal electoral systems, told Simcoe Community Media at the beginning of the process that the goal of the ward boundary review is to balance population numbers across wards while accounting for future growth projections through 2034.
Well, the goal is to create fair representation, right? This is a healthy process. This is something that most communities that are experiencing modest to high rates of growth do fairly regularly. We want to make sure that the population is balanced, but also that the wards provide for fair representation, ensuring that communities of interest are protected and kept together, but that the ward boundary works for the people of Barrie.
The City Council has now narrowed the options down to two potential plans for redrawing ward boundaries. Option 1 focuses on achieving population equality across all wards by 2036. It prioritizes representation by population, meaning each ward would have roughly the same number of residents in the future. On the other hand, Option 2 aims to strike a balance between current population and projected population in 2036. This option also places greater emphasis on preserving communities of interest, neighborhoods, or areas that share common characteristics, concern, or collective identity. However, it remains unclear how the city plans to define or identify these communities. Watson and Associates, the consulting firm hired to conduct the review, will carry out public consultations this spring. A final recommendation will follow shortly after, with City Council expected to make a final decision in June of this year. Following are our interviews and coverage of council deliberations.
Hello, my name is Olivia Goglitz. I go to Ferndale Woods Elementary School and I'm in 4th grade. So when I first walked in, I have to be honest, I felt a little bit nervous. But after a little bit, I got used to it and I'm really happy and excited and I feel this burst of joy inside whenever I see this place. It was a wonderful experience. That's something I will never forget. To be honest, I didn't really know much about the municipal government when I first walked in, but then I learned that majority of the stuff that happens in our life is decided in the meetings here at City Council. The ice storm, well, it was a massive disaster. A lot of trees fallen down, and I really liked how fast they were to call in people and have it all cleaned up. We learn about the city bylaws, taxes, finances, and all the requests from members of the community. I would say don't stop. It's an amazing experience. It is nerve-wracking at the beginning, but then after, 5 minutes, you get used to it, you feel comfortable, and it feels like the most amazing thing that's happened.
We are going to go right into our comments from our Mayor, Olivia Goglitz of Ferndale Woods Elementary School. Now, you were sworn into office on April the 9th, and you've served for a 3-week term. So I'd like to invite you up to the mayor's desk to take your seat and tell us about your experiences as mayor.
Good evening, Mayor Nuttall, council members, and members of the community. My name is Olivia Goglitz, and I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to be your student mayor for the month of April. It was an experience I will never forget. When I first started, I didn't understand much about the municipal government. I thought it was something adults did behind closed doors, but after attending meetings, listening to people from the community, and seeing how decisions are made, I realized that the most important I realize how important it all is. The City Council makes important decisions to improve our community and making sure everyone is safe. One of the most intriguing parts of this experience was listening to many topics discussed at each meeting. As a student, I didn't expect to find these conversations so interesting. But I was wrong. I saw how the council responded quickly after the ice storm that left broken trees all over the city, organizing cleanup efforts and keeping the public informed. I also listened to discussions about water safety, new building development, city finances, and changes in the local bylaws. These issues might seem complicated at first, but I came to understand how much they impact all of us. One of the most important things that I learned from watching these discussions is that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about listening and asking the right questions and speaking up when something matters. I saw how hard it is to make decisions that help everyone, watching council members work together, ask questions, and carefully think through everything before making a decision, and taught me about lots of teamwork and problem solving. As a student mayor, I took my role seriously. I talked to my classmates and teachers to better understand the issues that matter to them. Some of the concerns I heard were about things like safer crosswalks near schools, more activities in parks and recreation programs, and improvement to our roads. I've come to an understanding of how important it is to stay informed, since so many of the things that affect our lives are decided right here in these meetings. Now I see how important it is for people, and especially young people, to stay engaged and involved in what's happening around them. This experience has inspired me to stay involved in my community. Maybe one day I'll even run for the office myself. No matter what I do in the future, I'll always remember what I learned here. Before I finish, I want to say thank you again to the council, to city staff, to my school and family for supporting the student leadership. And I hope that many more students get the chance to do something like this. Thank you for making space for me at the table and showing me respect and responsibility. Service are the foundation of a strong community. Another student mayor signing out. Thank you.
Well, Olivia, that was a very, very, very good speech. So thank you for sharing all about your time and the things that you've learned while you served as mayor. And it's my honor to present you with this certificate. But I think we should probably invite your mom down to take a photo, maybe a little bit closer, so that we can get that for you. Okay. Wonderful. Congratulations. Well, that was an incredible speech and very, very, very well done. You're making the rest of us look bad, as often happens with our student mayors. But thank you, and I hope you do remember your term in office as student mayor forever. We're going to move on to the confirmation of the minutes. And this is the council meeting from April the 16th. They've been circulated. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, they're adopted as printed. We have no reports or deputations, tax applications, communications committee reports, deferred business, direct motions, or presentations. So we're at inquiries. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
I have none, thank you.
Any other inquiries around the table? I have Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is to do with also the circulation list of April the 30th, and that's the A2. We did the seeds to sow.
So I would ask that we hold that to the circulation list.
Sure, okay.
Portion. Now that's going to be,
Because I'll have a question.
Is it time sensitive? Councillor Rietma, is it time sensitive? Okay, so when we do the circulation list next Wednesday. Awesome, thank you. Any other inquiries? Seeing none, announcements? Councillor Kungle?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I've got 3 announcements. There's a series of events happening at Legion 147. Hopefully you've seen the beautiful banners that have been erected in commemoration of World War II veterans from across Simcoe County. I'll be joining the Legion on Monday, May the 5th. There is a ticketed event. If anyone is interested, please reach out to the Legion because that is not a drop-in. I believe it is a ticketed event in celebration of the 80th liberation of Holland. So that is a 1 p.m. Event happening with members of our Dutch community and other guests that have tickets to that. I also just wanted to briefly comment because today is the 30th anniversary of Habitat for Humanity Huronia. So on behalf of Mayor Nuttall, and I think to thank the Mayor's office for giving me some background on the impact that they've had for the past 30 years. So in Ward 3, they have one of their 4 sites across Simcoe County. So I was able to join them on behalf of Council to celebrate their 30th anniversary, but also during Volunteer Week. We did highlight their 120 volunteers from all ages that have been opening doors and changing lives. So they are in the middle of their 67th build. And I think our most recent one was, on ESSA in Barrie. So a lot of movement happening there, but if you have the chance to stop in and meet Rob, the CEO, if he's there, members of their team, Debbie, Teresa, and others. I had the benefit of connecting with James, affectionately known as James Bond, who is a volunteer there, and we talked a little bit about what it meant to volunteer for being aligned to an effort that has a mission around really creating attainable housing, dignified housing. So thank you to all those over the past 30 years that have been doing this great work and wishing, if I may, on behalf of council, I expressed our wishes for them to have another exceptional 30 years ahead. But again, it's when we're talking about housing and affordability, it was interesting to spend time there today because they are always and ever looking at partnerships, and they've got some pretty great, unique, innovative ideas forward about how they're partnering. So I think more good things to come. And then lastly, in celebration because it is also great for our circular economy about donating to Restore or the Furniture Bank, and they all partner together. But as we upcycle really great things from your home that don't need to go to the landfill, every 30th day of the month in celebration of their 30th anniversary, they are offering 30% off all products in their stores every month for the next year. So go in, take a peek, and help support kind of getting things in and out of spaces that can make a difference to others. My last announcement, only because it's timely for this weekend, is on behalf of the city. I'm excited to be joining the Barrie Area Badminton Association on May the 3rd. They will be hosting their tournament again in Ward 3 at East Bayfield Community Centre. As an old badminton player, I'd like to think I'm still competitive in my singles game, but people are showing me otherwise. So great to see individuals, new and old, coming back to that tournament and that growing. And my appreciation really to staff that are helping to support big events like this coming into our rec facilities.
Good evening, Chair Hamilton, members of the Infrastructure and Community Investment Committee. I'm Michael Hassey, joined by Rick Webster, both residents of the Lakehouse Condos. Rick is on our board of directors there, and as we know, we're adjacent to Sam Cancilla Park. Our goal is to spark a discussion about transforming this underutilised waterfront park, especially as plans the city are going to decommission the water reservoir. Sam Cancilla Park, exceptional location on Kempenfelt Bay, makes it a prime opportunity to enhance Barrie's waterfront, yet is currently inaccessible, uninviting, and fails to serve our growing downtown. As downtown intensification continues, quality public spaces are critical. The east side of downtown in particular lacks accessible, high-quality amenity spaces for residents and visitors. The city's strategic plan and Waterford Master Plan prioritizes vibrant public spaces. Revitalizing Sam Cancilla Park aligns with these goals and addresses a gap in our infrastructure. The planned decommissioning of the old water reservoir is a catalyst to rethink Sam Cancilla Park. Our concept, developed by Lakehouse Condo residents, envisions a modern, inclusive park that leverages our waterfront. Some of the key aspects that we can see from the plan is to allow pedestrian access directly from Dunlop Street. As we know, the park today, it has a great big slope from the street to the bottom, and it's not accessible. It's very difficult to access the park. It also has very limited access to the trail. So my goal in the design that I have, a concept that I brought, will give access to the waterfront, and I would hope that maybe we would be able to put some viewing areas right on the water that have access directly from the park. I've also incorporated in the concept a children's play area, and I go back to the years that I owned and operated our business from 17 Point Street. We were there for over 30 years. Back in those days, there was a beautiful children's playground there. It's gone today. It's completely overgrown and completely neglected. We've seen very strong interest from our neighbours and believe this vision reflects the broader residential priorities for a connected, vibrant downtown. I'm going to hand it over to my good friend Rick here.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, Chair Hamilton and members. Please excuse my raspy voice. If any of you have had this cold, if you know of a recipe to get rid of it, I'd appreciate it. I'm Rick Webster, and I'm continuing our presentation. Sam Cancilla's Park current state discourages use. It is not accessible, it lacks modern amenities, and feels disconnected from the waterfront. For example, the lack of accessible pathways, outdated infrastructure, and lack of lighting, which permits its appeal, especially for seniors, families, or people with mobility challenges. With downtown's growing population, the demand for quality public spaces will only increase. Without action, the east side will continue to lack equitable access to the parks that match Barrie's waterfront potential. Our concept addresses these challenges by creating an inviting, accessible park that serves diverse users. residents, businesses, and tourists alike. Perfect place to watch the air show, the waterfront activities in the wintertime, etc. It supports economic growth by enhancing the waterfront's appeal, drawing visitors to nearby businesses, and boosting property values in the East End. Through discussions with neighbors and residents, we've gathered input showing enthusiasm for revitalization. Local sentiment highlights a desire for better waterfront amenities. We respectfully urge the committee to consider our concept as a starting point for Sam Cancilla Park revitalization and to prioritize this project in upcoming budgets or planning. We are eager to collaborate with the city, sharing our full concept and engaging further with residents to refine this vision. Thank you for your time and your commitment to Barrie's infrastructure. We look forward to your support in transforming Sam Cancilla Park into a community asset and something that Cancilla family will be proud of going forward. Thank you.
Thank you both for the presentation. I will open it up to questions or comments from committee members. If you want to stay at the podium, thank you. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Through you to staff, I wonder, Michelle or Bala, either or. Seeing this concept, are we at the right point with the decommissioning and the construction? Is that a tender yet, and is there part of the tender that's a restoration portion of it?
Through you, Chair Hamilton, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. So we haven't retained the consultant yet, so we are not at the tender stage. The first step, if the budget's approved, or if this report's approved, would be for us to retain a consultant, put together the tender package, and then we would go out for a tender.
A follow-up, if you may, Madam Chair. This might be to the clerk. Would there need to be an amendment that the budget that's written be approved, but adding a component to a restoration of utilization of the park once it's completed? Would we need a motion for that in case they come back over budget?
Through you, Chair Hamilton, to the Deputy Mayor. We would need some type of budget for sure to move forward with any kind of decommissioning or hiring a consultant to work or look at this project.
The budget's already there for the decommissioning and the consultant, but I was just wondering if it was part of it. I would just hate for us to decommission, cause excavation, bring it back to the state it's in without the infrastructure there, but bringing fill back in and stuff, and then getting to a point where we had to, or we looked at in the 2026 budget to bringing a park on the waterfront. Could they not work simultaneously? So would this budget allow you to look at that and then come back to council with a cost associated? Or would it be better to separate them and just have direction that staff undertake the restoration portion? I'm just kind of looking for direction. I would hate to do a job where we waste money on the restoration side of bringing the park back to, nothing but a field, and then paying extra to have it brought to something to use. So I'm just kind of looking for a little bit of guidance.
Through you, Chair Hamilton, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. Excuse me, before I defer it over to Bala, I think what council has approved is effectively the decommissioning of the reservoir itself, which I would describe as sort of a down and dirty exercise. I think it involves the filling in for safety reasons of the reservoir. I don't believe it anticipates any sort of beautification or changes to the park. But perhaps Bala can enlighten us. I think we would need additional direction and budget to undertake that.
Okay. Through you, Chair Hamilton, to Deputy Mayor Thompson, that's correct. I think if we were to explore this concept, I think we would need additional budget and additional approvals from council. I think it would make sense to at least initially look to see if we can integrate the two projects, just to see if there were any efficiencies. So I think initially we'd probably report back on additional costs that would be required if we were to go beyond what's in this report.
So with saying that, the wording in our conversation tonight, you feel you could achieve that, or would you need verbiage in the motion to be amended to have staff investigate the utilization of the park upon restoration?
Through you, Chair Hamilton, to Deputy Mayor Thompson, yeah, I think we would need additional words for staff to investigate.
I'll go to Mr. Prowse first.
I apologize, Chair Hamilton. I just different listening with both ears tonight, actually. So it's my understanding that staff actually have proposed for 2028 work on Sam Cancilla Park, and a design and budget are working its way through the organization. So I think really what we would need to do is for council to direct us to advance that if you wanted to do it sooner. Otherwise, you would expect that we will come to you and ask for approval and budget, but the work actually would not commence till 2028. So I think we're moving at the same direction. I think the timing is just a little bit different. So that has already been anticipated by staff, but we're in outlying years, not sort of immediately. So I think we would not necessarily need additional direction on budget because we will be asking for that. But certainly if you want that work advanced, including the interpretation of what was presented here tonight, we would need that direction to move it up.
Okay, so, and I know Mayor Nuttall wanted to speak, so I'm just thinking if we're working like that and just on timelines, like I said, we're going to decommission, which is going to occur next year, I believe. So that puts us in 2026. So we're not going to leave it with, construction fence and holes. So I think it would be prudent for us to advance both projects so they run simultaneously. I believe there's cost savings instead of going in and, removing everything that was just set out to bring this back to, a safe piece of land.
I'm going to go. I know there's other questions and comments, and if you want to think about wording to advise, but we'll go to Councillor Rietma first, and then Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. My question has to do with timing. The demolition of the reservoir, is that something that we really have to do like right away or next year? Or can we leave it and leave the fencing up, of course, but leave it and then, as the Deputy Mayor was talking, join the two projects at the same time, do them at the same time so that we decommission and then in the end we end up with a park?
Through you, Chair Hamilton, to Councillor Rietma, if the reservoir and the pump station's not decommissioned, then you would have to have the fencing up. But as long as the fencing's up, we should be okay. Because the reason we have the fencing up is that the reservoir is not in a condition whereby we could allow public traffic above it. So we would have to have the fencing up if the facilities are not decommissioned.
Okay, I guess that, we won't be able to use the park for a while. but we can't use it now. And it seems to me that if we can put the two projects together, then I think we're probably saving money and accomplishing some good work. As the delegation has suggested, there's the park itself as it is now is not really functioning particularly well, and so I think we would get an asset out of it and probably save money from putting the two projects together. So I would support some sort of wording to that effect. And I guess I have a question for the delegation as well. At the very corner there of the park on Blake Street is a gazebo type building that was reconstructed a number of years ago, I think by the Optimists, or Qantas, thanks. And your plan didn't show that. Any thoughts on that? Is it something that's integral to the park, or is it just something that we need to think about later?
Later, it'd be up to the city to decide. Mine's a concept, and I have no comment on that at this time.
Okay, no, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Chair Hamilton. By way of consideration, when you go out for contract for decommissioning, there'll have to be a final grade proposal. I would suggest that it might be at that time that you asked for the, while the park is being final graded, if you will, that it be final graded to a plan, either this one or something quite like it. Because if it's final graded to the plan that's showed here, then the rest of it is a matter of placing the walkways, the benches, and so on. So you no longer have to engage heavy equipment to come in. So there will have to be a final grade, obviously, in the decommissioning process. I'm going to suggest that would be a course of action. Additionally, I don't think the fence is there at no cost. I believe it's rental fencing. It's running on the taxpayer's meter. I can also tell you that I walk it every day and it gets pushed over every other day. It's an eyesore and it's unsafe, and leaving it that way is not enhancing our waterfront. But that's my thought. In terms of the cost in particular, there is a final grade to be considered, and it would be a good time to have the design choice and final grade it to that choice.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Mayor Nettle now.
Yeah, thank you. Gentlemen, I'm sorry that I stepped out during your presentation. And before I ask questions, I just want to say thank you for putting the work, time, effort, money into improving the waterfront, improving the quality of life around you. I think that is a beautiful civic duty you've done.
Thank you.
And knowing both of you, I know that that's where your hearts are too. So, so thank you. I think there's some wise words from you there, Mr. Webster, in terms of I think your experience in the at least the service of construction sector, but also municipal experience, right? And so thank you for that. I have one thing that I think that we need to consider here and add on to the motion, and I apologize to the Deputy Mayor that I didn't bring this earlier into the rest of the committee as well, which is, you know, the corner property is still a question mark. But I think that we should send staff off to make it an exclamation mark one way or another. Because the conversation you're having all started because there was a little bit of a thing happening with the decommissioning, and then there was already a want for an improvement of the park itself, right? And the reality is that it could end up being much larger. And I'm not going to speak for council, but I'm guessing if council were to purchase said properties, if there was a willing buyer and a willing seller, we wouldn't leave it as a commercial building. And if we do want to, I wouldn't want to buy it because I don't want to be a landlord. So with that, I don't know what the wording needs to be, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but I would ask that you maybe take a friendly to include that at the same time. Because if it had been an option when the work was being done by Mr. Hassey, Mr. Webster, and the entire team there, they probably would have incorporated in the potential design that was being brought forward. So I'm not asking for it to slow it down. I support things coming together, but I just think there's a third thing that should come together at the same time.
Any other questions or comments by members of committee? Otherwise, I'll move to any other questions or comments by members not on the committee. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Hamilton. To Bala, the time frame when we look at, obviously, and I agree wholeheartedly that we should try to do these things if we're going to do them simultaneously. I think there's huge cost savings, but is this something that normally the design, and this is a great, first look at a potential design, but would the normal process be that we look at other designs that how would that work? Is that something staff would design? Is it something we put out for tender? What would the process be to look at, a final design? And what kind of time frame? Because if we have we seem to have like this year and a half gap here, and if that process is a year long, then it may just kind of flow together. But normally, how long would that take?
Yeah. Through you, Chair Hamilton, to Councillor Nixon. So in terms of the demolition, typically we would hire a consultant for that work, and putting together the contract package would likely take about 9 to 12 months. Then we would tender it and we would go to construction, and that'll likely take about 6 months. With the park concept, again, we would hire a consultant, and I think the design would take at least 12 to 18 months typically, and then you would go to construction. But the actual parks planning is done by Ms. Banfield's group, and I'm not sure if Ms. Banfield wants to add to that.
Through you, Chair Hamilton, and to the, was it Councillor Nixon? Did you? Sorry. So fundamentally, as CAO Prowse suggested, this park was included in the waterfront strategic plan, and as we talked about in the outer years of the 10-year capital plan with work starting in 2028. So typically, whenever a project, when it comes up in the capital plan, it's time to start, even though there are concepts done through some of this work. There usually with parks planning, when they do the work, there is usually a couple of versions that we often do consultation on. A couple of options get presented to the public, and then a final version gets priced out and presented, and then subject to council's approval, included in the capital plan. So there are usually some variations of the theme. Now they are usually all parks planning, so it really is the same variation of different themes, but yeah, so that's typically what happens.
Thank you. Yeah, and this one, could maybe take a little longer, only due to the fact that of the grade. It's a little tougher to plan something when you've got that huge degree there. It might have to be done in 2 or 3 different levels. It may, but so I can see it taking a little longer. And thank you.
Thank you. I'll just note that Councillor Harvey actually just sent around the master plan in the Sam Cancilla Park, future plans for that, so people can take a look. That was that Ms. Banfield was just referring to. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will now move to the motion as printed.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed. Yeah. And then basically just at the end with the other piece of property and to take everything into consideration.
I'm going to assist. So I think the first part of the motion needs to be the creation of the new capital project for the decommissioning of Bayview Park. Then as written on the agenda. Then the second paragraph of the motion would be that the capital project concerning Sam Cancilla Park be moved up to commence work in 2025, simultaneously with the Bayview Park restoration project. That is part of the Sam Cancilla Park project Staff review the design concept as presented by Mr. Hassey this evening, and that they also engage with the property owner at the corner of Dunlop Street and Mulcaster Street with respect to both projects.
Excellent. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion as amended? All those opposed? And it passes. And I didn't actually speak to it, so I just want to thank you very much to both of you for coming in. And again, just echoing Mayor Nettles' comments, the time and attention that you spent in this, and the concept I think was excellent, very timely, obviously, and it was a great conversation for us to have. So really appreciate both of you. Thank you. All right, moving us along to item number 3. There are no presentations. Item number 4, there are no standing items. So we'll move on to the additional item held, which was 6.2, report of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee dated March 6, 2025, and the following recommendation. And I believe Deputy Mayor Thompson, you held that.
Thank you. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed, and I'd like to refer this to Finance and Good Governance.
Okay, a referral can we discuss? Are there any questions? Or no, we cannot discuss that. So all those in favor of referring this to Finance and Governance, all those opposed, and that passes. I will move us on to the last item held, which was 6.3, report of the Arts Advisory Committee dated March 25th, the recommendation pertaining the Adult Entertainment Bylaw, and this was held by Councillor Rietma. I think you are on the Arts Committee, actually, if you want to speak to it. And
I am on the Arts Committee, and but I can tell you that I'm not into burlesque particularly. So, so I've held it, and I think there's an amendment to suggest that the report back, instead of going to the Arts Advisory Committee, go to Finance and Responsible Governments. So that's the amendment that I have on my phone, and I'll put the motion as printed and then offer that amendment.
Okay. Oh, my apologies. Can I just read that out? I just want to make sure everyone is clear on the wording. It was sent out, but it was a bit different than I read it, so I'm just going to read it here again. That staff and legislative and court services department investigate how other municipalities have separated burlesque dancing and other forms of adult entertainment from the Adult Entertainment Bylaw and report back to the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee. Were there any other questions or comments from members of committee? I did have one. I read this and I must say I was a little taken aback as why this was a focus or something we're discussing. I read the Arts Committee terms and reference, the objectives, just to understand, given everything that's going on today, I sometimes struggle with what we're spending our time and attention on and what we're spending staff's time and attention on. And looking at the mandate of the committee, it really is to ensure that arts and culture is appropriately represented in city plans, policy initiatives, infrastructure projects, and budgets. So I'm not sure how this came to, and I just wanted a bit more background perhaps from someone on committee as to, is there a lot of complaints, or what was the impetus or the driving factor in bringing this forward? Because I do think we need to be mindful of staff's time, and I just wanted a bit more background or context.
Yeah, and I'll defer to the chair, but if needed, but the way that it came to the committee was that, first of all, apparently, burlesque is a form of art. And secondly, there are lots of burlesque shows, apparently, that are done in other municipalities which have similar bylaws. But in our case, I think it's the way our bylaw is worded, burlesque is not permitted. And there is quite a arts community that is very supportive of this form of art, and they would like to be able to operate here in Barrie. They have been operating here in Barrie until such time as they ran afoul of our bylaw. So that's kind of the background to it, and so Apparently, this bylaw dates back 20 years or so, so it's probably time for a refresh in any event.
Yeah, I think the bylaw is from 2005. Just a question for staff then. I think our current bylaw actually does allow for exemptions in a case-by-case approach, I believe. So I'm just wondering, would that not be the case rather than separating it out altogether? This would be dealt with as a case-by-case basis. Because if you separate it out altogether, it's a slippery slope, right? Because then you could have other adult entertainment industries, businesses saying that they're just offering less. So I don't know any other municipalities that have done this. I think Hamilton is one. So I'd just be interested in staff's comments on the current bylaw and the exemptions that are permitted there, where cases like this, where you've got burlesque dancers that are a form of art, could be dealt with differently. Is that not already accounted for in the current bylaw? Jason Forgraf, there you are. Excellent, thank you.
Through you, Chair Hamilton, to the councillor. It is something that could be visited as an exemption. Where this stemmed from is a local studio that does them quite often and likes to do it in a public setting, ticket sales, that sort of thing. So just the way the bylaw is currently worded, it doesn't mention burlesque, but it does talk to the nature of the act and the reaction from the crowd. And that's where our interpretation and enforcement has come from. I don't know if it is something needed to come back as an exemption to council every time they want to do one.
So it's not the business that would be given an exemption, it would be every time they want to do an event, as the current bylaw reads.
I may want to defer to Madam Councillor, Clerk, but currently the business does not require a business license unless they go to that sort of entertainment. Then they would require a business license to do that, but they wouldn't be able to travel to certain, like, other locations.
Okay, I think there was another question, Councillor Corser.
If I may add some clarity, as Mr. Forgrave mentioned, there was brought to the Arts Advisory Committee where we were notified that there was a burlesque group that, or entity in the city that was stopped from performing. And burlesque is a little different than what the licensing that Mr. Forgrave was speaking to, I believe, was stripping, which is an absolutely different, it's a different licensing of an establishment completely than a nightclub or a venue or a performance or a theater. So there is a distinct difference between burlesque and stripping, and it's the style is completely different. It's vintage, playful, artistic, and it absolutely is a celebration of the woman's body. It is not at all associated with what would be considered stripping. And as mentioned, a lot of municipalities actually have already set this, have modernized the language of their bylaws or the intent of their bylaws, because the intent of burlesque is definitely not the same as the intent as stripping. So the Arts Advisory Committee wanted to bring this forward so that we could maybe take a look at this bylaw that is over 20 years old to modernize it, because I know that there's been other groups that have come to town that would not be considered with the intent that is there with the classic thing of what we think of stripping, and they've had to be turned away, and that would be revenue for the city, because it would be also fundraising events and different things that has been complicated by this law. So just to take a look at it, crack it open and eyeball it after 20 years might not be a bad idea, or to expand it or to make it more specific, so that we're not like shutting out other forms of art.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of committee or members of non-committee at this point? Seeing none, I will ask if there, as the motion as printed then with the revision finance, reporting back to the finance and responsible governance. All of those in favor? All those opposed? And it passes. I will move us on here to, where are we? Sorry, lost my place. We are on 6.1, I think, back to item 6, reports of advisory committees. 6.1, report of the communities in bloom. Did I do that one? Oh, I've done it all. All right, so 7 reports to the committee, there's none. Number 8, items for discussion, there's none. So we are adjourned at 5:42 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Good afternoon. I'll now call the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. Consent items. For the consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda to see if members of committee would like to deal with them on consent or hold them for discussion. Items that are not held will be deemed approved on consent with no further discussion. They will then move forward to the next general committee meeting for consideration. We have no public meetings or open delegations today. Our first is a presentation by staff and officers and agents of the corporation. It's a presentation from Watson and Associates Economists Limited in regards to the 2025 Ward Boundary Review Preliminary Options Report. I would now like to call upon Jack Amendolia from Watson and Associates to provide his presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Council for having me here this evening to talk about the Ward Boundary Review process. As was mentioned, my name's Jack Amendolia. I'm a managing partner at Watson and Associates and the project lead for this Ward Boundary Review. So really tonight, a couple of things we wanted to go through. We wanted to just provide a little refresher to Council that we're entering phase 2 of the project. We wanted to make Council aware that this next phase involves the preliminary options with the intention of going out to the public to solicit feedback on those examples and options that we put out there. And I'm going to start out today just with a little bit of context and refresher as to the process and some of the legislation. So just a quick reminder, when we look at the Municipal Act for guidance, for better or worse, there's lack thereof. The Municipal Act doesn't give councils a lot of criteria or guidelines in how to conduct a ward boundary review. The legislation is pretty basic with regard to this. It says that you have to have a minimum council size of 5. One of those people has to be the mayor. The mayor has to be elected at large. And other than that, it's really up to council to determine if you want to go bigger, if you want to be elected by wards or at large, if you want a hybrid system. So right now, the focus of this review is on the actual wards that you have. There's been no contemplation at this point anyways, or nothing we've heard from the public in terms of council size or changing the composition. So again, this presentation and the public engagement section going forward is just looking at possible redesigns of the wards. I'll also remind council and the public that there's a lack of criteria or guidelines in the legislation, but that doesn't mean that we don't use guidelines when we're going through this process. Through consultant experience, doing many other ward boundary reviews, looking at case law, both through the Ontario Land Tribunal as well as Supreme Court decisions over several decades, there has been a set of guiding principles established for ward boundaries. And these are principles that are largely used in democratic countries to establish wards or government size, similar to how federal or provincial ridings are conducted. So a couple of things that I want to touch on. So a major one and present in pretty much every democratic government in the world is a concept of representation by population, a concept that each resident should have equal access to council and their vote should be equitable across whether it's a country, province, or municipality. So that's an important one that we have to go by when we're looking at new wards. The other one too that goes along with that is When we try to do these ward reviews, it's not just for the next election in 2026, but we're trying to give a municipality something to look at for at least 2 or 3 elections. So you're not reconstructing the wards every single election. Again, sometimes growth occurs at such a rapid pace that you may have no choice, but we're trying to look forward. Again, in a place like Barrie, when we look at the examples, we'll see that's difficult. When there's really large magnitude of growth happening quickly and in concentrated areas, it gets very difficult to provide something that works today and something that works tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about that. The other one, and this is just as important, I think, when we talk about population, is communities of interest. I'll go back to the second one in a second. But communities of interest means that when we draw wards, one thing we like to say is, as much as possible, we try to draw lines around a community of interest, not through it. Again, because of population and concentration of growth, sometimes that's not possible. And when that's not possible, we try to find what that proper line would be. And the last thing is trying to create boundaries that are identifiable. So trying to use, whether it's waterways or rivers or highways or major roads, we try to use something that you know when you're going from one ward to the other. And all of these really are how we deem whether the system we're designing is providing effective representation. Effective representation is what we call the overarching principle. If we're meeting the other ones, then we figure that we have a system that's providing that. The other thing before I move on is it's very difficult to hit all these perfectly. I have not designed, I think, or it's very rare that you're going to design a system that hits all of these, because some of these guiding principles are push-pulls. A lot of times I liken it to whack-a-mole. We fix, communities of interest, and then we go, oh, dang it, we now have screwed up population. And we fix that, and we're like, oh, now we're using a weird line. So really we're trying to balance those as best as possible. So before I look at the options, I want to touch on the existing ward system, and I think this is extremely important. When we evaluated your existing ward system, in some municipalities, we do a review. They haven't looked at the system in, honestly, 30, 40 years. And we look at it, and we honestly have to blow it up, right? We look at it and say, there's nothing here that's working from whether it's community, whether it's population. That's not the case in Barrie. When we evaluated Barrie's ward system, and you can see from the evaluation table as well as the population table in the bottom left corner, it works quite well. The lines are pretty clear. The population parity amongst the wards, it's not perfect, but it's decent. It's in the acceptable range. The communities of interest, again, is it perfect? No, but it's pretty good. It's a system that works pretty good. However, what I talked about a couple of minutes ago, Barrie, as we all know, unless you're living under a rock, has been one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. That's continued or projected to continue happening, maybe in a little bit of a different way as the South End starts to take off as well. So what we tried to really focus on when we created options for you is not so much what's happening now, but we tried to think about what's going to happen in the next election, and like I said, the election after that. The other thing too is when we think about growth here, in some places it's more conceptual. In some places it's we may grow. I don't believe that to be the case here. Growth is uncertain right now, economics are uncertain, but there are strong applications and strong growth coming here. So we really tried to focus on the future. And when you look at this, it works really well, but once that population starts to take off, the population parity takes a pretty big hit. And we see on the 2036 side of this, a lot of reds, which means those are wards that are greater than 25% from the overall average. And what we try to do from a guiding principle perspective, again, as much as possible, is try to stay in that 25% acceptable range. So when we move to some of the options, I'll go through these quickly just to give council a brief context and some of what we were thinking when we designed these. And again, some of these options, we know that there's possible things that may not work, that the public or councillors may have issues with. Sometimes it's very deliberate because we want to get feedback about a certain line and where we put it. And we want to provide some of the examples I talked about in terms of the guiding principle to say, yeah, we know that line's not great, but if we move it to where you want to, this is what happens with population. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So there's 5 options that we intend to go to the public with. Obviously, there'll be some discussion about that tonight, but the 5 options are as such. So the first one is really focusing, like I said, on that 2036 population. If you look at the table on the bottom left, all the wards are well within the 25% acceptable range. 4 of the wards are within 5% of the average range, which we call optimal, and the spread of population amongst the wards is pretty tight. So it's very good in terms of parity, has some familiarity to what we know today, so it's not a complete destruction of what we're familiar with today. We think it provides, again, a decent job of community of interest, so we think it's a fairly successful option. Again, a couple of issues perhaps in the existing population. We see that the bottom ward is Ward J is a little bit outside the acceptable range, but as that growth comes online, everything falls quite nicely into parity. In option 2A, and we'll look at 2B in a second as well, we tried a little bit of a different approach, which we called a little bit of a more balanced approach, where in one that we just looked at, the focus was largely on population parity in 2036. This one tries to look at 2025 as well as 2036, tries to put a little bit more weight and focus on communities of interest. As a result, we get a little bit of a different configuration. We can see that there's some crossing of wards across Highway 400. We can see that especially in 2025, we have one ward that's at 43% of the ideal population, so below or around 7,000. That's also a ward that's going to get or projected to get extreme amounts of growth. So quite quickly that ward grows into parity. However, there's another ward, Ward G, that starts to grow out of parity in the future. So again, in 10 years, there may need to be some other change to fix a ward here or there. There may need to be a line that gets tweaked. And that's really what we tried to do in 2B. In 2B, this is about 85% similar to 2A, but we play with a few wards in the south end to eliminate that unacceptable population range we had in one ward in option 2A. And you can see in 2B, we now have 3 wards in 2036 that are optimal, and all the wards are within the acceptable range. Perhaps a little bit of a caveat is that by doing that, perhaps the lines in some of those wards aren't as ideal or as clean as in 2A. And then 3A, quite a departure from what we've been talking about. So if we think of option 1, focus on population and very technical in terms of that 2036 population. 2A and 2B, a little bit more balanced across the guiding principles. 3A, and we'll look at 3B in a second as well, the focus is largely on community of interest. So we see that no wards cross the 400. We tried to pay, again, as careful attention as we could into existing neighborhoods and trying to ensure that there's connectiveness between those neighborhoods in the same ward. But when we look at population parity, not so good. In existing population, we have, I think, 5 wards that are outside of the acceptable range, only 1 ward in the optimal range. And when we look forward 10 years, it doesn't get any better. We still continue to have 5 wards outside of that 25% acceptable range. Again, it's not to say that, and we never know if you get appealed or how the Ontario Land Tribunal will decide, it's not to say systems have wards that are all within 25%. And if you don't, you automatically have to redo it. Not at all, because as long as you can make a case that the reason it's out of population parity is because you think that the community of interest guiding principle is paramount, then you could make that case. But there's risk here if you get appealed, because you never know how the OLT is going to decide. So I wanted to point that out with this one. And in 3B, we tried to fix a lot of it. We tried to stay in that same concept with a community of interest focus. Wasn't perfect. We still have a couple of wards when you get out to 2036 that are a bit low, that aren't getting quite the development and some of the other wards are. But for the most part, you now have 2 wards that are optimal. Most of the wards are within that acceptable range, and you still try to, or it still really focuses, like I said, on that community of interest principle. So those are the options. I'll be very quick with my last point. I just wanted to make council aware, like I said at the beginning, that we're now entering into this phase 2. We're going to be going out to the public in a week and a half, I believe, with a couple of in-person engagement sessions. The website will also be updated to reflect the new report, new survey, new interactive maps. And then our intention is to solicit all that feedback and come back to council with some final options to consider. So thanks very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. And just before I turn it over to members of committee, just like to remind everybody, obviously, A, to do at the time, but also to keep their questions as a point of clarification in regards to this, because I don't believe this is the time to really start debating it, as indicated by the presenter, that there is further public consultation that will be taking place. I do see Councillor Kungal's hand up first. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Harvey, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Amendolia. Question about what's going to the public, or what may be considered in addition to what you've presented. I have an assumption, so I just wanted to manage that. So when you were going through the forecasting around population increase to 2036, and I saw you source that, is there any lens or conversation, I think I share this more with my one-on-one, so while we make some assumptions about how and where people will live as we look at population density across the city, do we also have, I will call it a layer or filter of consideration that says, if we have developments that we know have been approved that are quite high density, and we know we've been focusing Bayfield seed areas into certain kind of, I'll call them junctures or areas, while we don't have that timeline on occupancy, but we know unit size, is that being brought into the picture of where we're going to look at that inflate or deflate the assumptions based on data that you've used on this over time?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. If I understand correctly, if we're talking about how we project population, we're definitely looking at density of units to project that population, and all those populations absolutely have different yields associated with them. So we've actually done this in two ways. One thing we've done in working with your planning department is looking at population existing, and that's usually done by looking at census as a base, permits that have been issued by density type, and applying density yield specific assumptions. Same thing for the population going forward. So absolutely, condos are producing less people than low density. And maybe the other part of your question in terms of timing and uncertainty, perhaps, not that it's baked into the projections, but I think there is uncertainty in the high density market right now with the condo market. So perhaps when we're looking at those projections and the population arising out of them, if you know, perhaps to put it this way, if I was council and I'm looking at a ward that is really low and we think it's going to increase in the next 10 years, but it's very condo heavy, perhaps that's going to have a little more uncertainty associated with it than a low density subdivision where applications are already in and there's already things going on. So I hope I answered correctly.
I believe you did. So my assumption is, while this kind of moves through its own process and it's going to the public and coming back, the thresholds should probably stay true to what's being presented, because it does, I think, absorb or include considerations to say, we know certain areas in the city we're going to go up in density based on what we're already seeing approved, but maybe not yet occupied or in current population stats.
It does, correct.
Okay.
We haven't compiled our own forecast. All our information is consistent with the city's planning and the county's planning as well.
Okay.
So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other members of committee? Any members of non-committee? Great. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Nagusi.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. Why is the word designated by later rather than numbers? You know, when you go for public consultation, I think it might create a little bit confusion since most of the resident knows their word by number.
Yeah, thank you for the question again to the chair. I believe the intention to use letters was just to move away from any association with the present wards, right? So it wasn't that we didn't want to get into people saying, well, that's my ward and why are you changing Ward 1? So we went with a randomized lettering approach to try to move perspective away from that and just say, look, these are the wards, they're just identified by letters for now. However, it's important for the public and council to be aware that if you make a decision and you choose an alternate ward boundary, you can absolutely return back to your number configuration You can name them if you want. It's up to council to determine that. But the randomized lettering right now was just for public consultation purposes.
Okay, thank
you. Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Harvey. Sorry about that. Ms. Cook, it's not an amendment, is it? It's actually just direction, or?
Through Councillor or Chair Harvey, yeah, it would be like just be a motion, a direction of the committee.
Okay. Motion of direction of the committee, ward boundary review, that option 1 and option 2B of the 2025 ward boundary review preliminary option report dated April 29, 2025 be the only options moving forward for further public consultation prior to a final option being presented to council. That when the final options are presented to council, the numbering of the wards be done in such a manner to minimize the number of residents experience a change in their ward number. And I can speak to that.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Just looking at the report and stuff, and thanks for the report. It's very insightful, and you can see there's a lot of if-a, woulda, couldas in some of the later options, and I think a lot of us around here, and myself, I think when we did our one-on-ones, it was something I guess the consultants were saying that it's typical to like straight lines, and that makes it really identifiable and a lot easier to govern, I guess. You know, not changing like over a highway and stuff like that. So I think the ones that achieve it, and then with the numbers of population in 2025 where are going to be true, where in 2026 there's a lot of variables to get to that point. So that's kind of the direction I've taken to just eliminate some of them, just to kind of laser focus the public on really, I think, are the best options. And that's why I'm putting it forward.
Great, thank you. And actually, just before I go to yourself, Councillor Kungle, I just want to ask a point of clarity. I don't disagree with the direction of staff that's come forward, but on most of them, they seem to have very straight defined lines. Now, option 1, again, on a quick perusal and reading your report earlier in the week, does seem to make the most sense, but so I would be in Ward D. Now, if you look at Ward D, all of a sudden, halfway down the box, it's not a defined line. So I was just kind of curious as to how that all of a sudden jaggediness became part of where the boundary would be, because I think when we get too kind of crazy with lots of curves and everything, it causes confusion sometimes for residents and sometimes even for ourselves too.
Yeah, thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. Couple of things. I can look back at exactly why. I can't recall off the top of my head. I think it's a settlement area or something that those lines are jogging around, just from my knowledge and looking at it right now, but we can get back to you on that for sure. And let you know why we've done that, because I agree, typically we try to draw it straight. So I'd imagine there was a good reason for that one, but we'll let you know. The other thing to be aware of too is those are the exact kind of comments we hope to get, right? Because ultimately when we say we're going to come back with some final options, I would say 80–85% of the time, it's not exactly what we went out to the public with. There's a couple of tweaks in there because of these conversations and saying, well, I like that, but why is that line not straight? Or I like that, but why didn't you go up to, this concession instead? And we go back and look at it and say, yeah, we absolutely can. And it doesn't really change it. Or that's what we try to make sure is it doesn't fundamentally change the option that we're giving you. So we'll take that into consideration and we'll let you know why that line does that.
Great, thank you. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I'll start with a comment maybe on the amendment, and just it makes me think of a couple of pieces. I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe other options than removing that. So while this is public facing, are we missing opportunities for the public at least to kind of know that we did a broader consultation and these were looked at, but perhaps council has prioritized one or two that we think are the best options to really focus in on? But would we actually restrict, from a transparency, I just worry about that, would we restrict the public from commenting on the other options in case something comes out of that? Or if someone's going there and really cares about something that impacts more about the boundary they live in versus the ones maybe we're looking at in the first two. That's just a comment, is maybe how we frame that. Is it a restriction and saying we're just engaging here, but at least are we going to show you as we do that, that there were other considerations, but this is why we're leaning into the first two. So that's just my initial comment to that. I'm not too concerned about the secondary part of that. I think in general that it'll come with communications about what ward you're in, and in general we're still doing that over many years. So unless you're really engaging on a ward issue where your garbage collection or pieces, probably the biggest thing for me from looking at this on a residential complaint is it'll be interesting to see what we hear in that engagement from the public about what matters to them in this, other than maybe fair representation and understanding why we're going through the diligence of review. You know, it'll be interesting to see about what they think this change or potential change could do to impact their relationship with council or their communication. So, I mean, the only, I'm fine with going with the first two because that's the most change that I'm seeing in my ward. So from a selfish view, you know, those two options make sense to me. So I'm not concerned. I'm more concerned about how we frame that to the public if we're only coming with two. My other comment, and I think I'm moving between maybe a redirection to Mayor Nuttall or not necessarily. I think it's fair to the presenter. It doesn't get directly into the motion, but the biggest question I think that I have is when we're looking at the first two, so especially wards 3 and 1, I'm assuming the most conversations have been about how does this play out on things that have not yet been decided but are in conversation around boundary expansion. And so I'm not sure how we're handling that with this public engagement. I'm not sure if it's fair, one, to maybe through you, Chair Nixon, to go to Mayor Nuttall, or through the clerk, please.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Did I say Chair Nuttall?
Through Chair Harvey to Councillor Kungle. As part of the review, we made the consultants aware of future situations concerning the wards, and they have taken that into consideration. The impact to the residential properties is probably very minimal, as most of the land is vacant. So going forward, there's no concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. And so for me, it's probably just what I would expect that might get questioned there, but I'm not one way or another, but I'll lean on the side of making sure the public knows that there is broad consultation versus maybe just having two go forward. But maybe the focus of the conversation can be on the two, if it's felt to be that's what's most likely for this council's appetite to move ahead with. But we haven't gone to general committee or full council yet, so I don't know.
Great, thank you. And I do believe the presenter did indicate that usually what's being presented is not what the final product looks like anyway. And I don't disagree that giving people too many options at the beginning may convolute things for Watson moving forward. But with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mayor Nuttall.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And so I think if I may speak, to answer the question, but also just to the main motion as a whole. I think it's difficult until we have an understanding of what the outcome is to incorporate. Like I know that they've tried to, and I think the other thing is difficult to incorporate is how fast something would potentially move. So the last time there was annexation in the city of Barrie was 2010, the land came in, 9, I think the decision was made. And we didn't see a house on that until 2020, something like that. Ms. James Reed, it was 2007. Okay. So it was, I think it was 13 years, which would be outside of the scope of what we're even talking about. And like, I think that maybe there would be some small stuff that's easily accessible, those types of things, if everything aligned, if the province said yes, if our municipal partners said yes, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of ifs there for me. That doesn't mean for council there's not a lot of ifs. I'm just saying from my perspective. The motion, if I can speak to the motion as a whole, you know, for me, I don't have a horse in this race, literally, because I don't have a ward, right? And the most important concept of our democracy, if you asked me, is rep by pop. It's not does, you know, Essa Road or, you know, Whiskey Creek separate wards, because we all meet at the waterfront when we go to the beach, you know? We all moved here for the same reason. We all want to see Barrie propel and excel and be a great city. But where there becomes a disconnect for me, and maybe I'm being, you know, too philosophical about this, is when you have wards that have a great disparity. And, you know, my comments, I gave some comments in person, I'll give some comments now that are like the 25% to me is not 25%. And the 25 is not 25 because it's 25 on each ward, right? So if you're 23% off on one and 19% off on the other, right, it's actually 42% difference. And I understand why the guidelines are put forward that way. I understand why all the work's been done and why they use this as guiding principles to make recommendations. For me, as a purist on this policy, it doesn't fit. And so I'm really, you know, leaning towards, to me, we could do all the consultation in the world, and I'm good with any consultation. I think that might have been a staff to deputy mayor conversation. But when it comes back, like, I'm going to go down the rep by pop road because that's what I believe in. And I've served as a city councillor in a ward. It was formerly Ward 10, or it is Ward 10. I was formerly there. And much better representation today. And that ward was I think the second largest in the city in pop, but also had massive amounts of development. And if you aren't dealing with development beside existing units, you don't know how much work comes with that. Public meetings happen here, but there's lots of public meetings that happen there, at doorsteps, you know, in pubs, in restaurants, in coffee shops. And it's a lot of work. Like, it just is. And so this north-south balance that we're dealing with as a city, like, this is hard. It's because there hasn't been the same development happening in North Barrie that has been happening in South Barrie. And we created this city through the Innisfil annexation that has made us a lopsided city. And so when the representation or the ward structure catches up with the lopsided city, this is what you get, right? And so all those times we said no to any development in the North End, the resulting decade is that representation is now moved south. And I think that we need to be very clear about that. The representations move south because the population moves south. So for me, when my guiding principle is rep by pop, I believe in that just like to the core. To me, there shouldn't be a 25,000 person ward and a 13,000 person ward or a 15,000 person ward. There should be a convergence over the time period that was set out by Watson and by staff as they went through this process. And I really can't speak, I guess, too far in advance, but when it comes back, like, that's where I want to see it. If there's going to be major changes to whatever the proposals have been by Watson, I'll be supporting the ones that support rep by pop,
because it's what I believe in.
Great, thank you. Any members of non-committee that have any questions or clarification? Okay, we can deal with the direction to staff as indicated by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Any further discussion before I call the vote? Councillor Congo.
Just briefly, so on that, so I don't mind supporting it, but maybe somewhere from a communication side, clarifying that if we just go with the two in public consultation, where are we just providing access to all this information that's easy to find for the public? So if we do get questions, we can point to it. Sometimes it gets a little bit buried in the legislar. So I really just care about making sure the public know we've actually done an extensive review. And then from there, being able to maybe just make sure that if there's questions, you have the context or whatever you need to stand up and say, these are the two that council picked for us to do public consultation on. This is the why. So we're not setting you up for any problematic justification that you don't own.
Yeah, I'll first go to Madam Clerk and then Ms. James Reid.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Kungle, there is a separate webpage on the City of Barrie website related to the ward boundary review. Actually, I think it's on Building Barrie, where all this information would be posted. So we would post the consultant's report, the presentation that they provided this evening. We would also probably include the council motion or the direction saying about the two options moving forward. So it was very clear to the public the progression of this project.
That's great. Thank you, Wendy.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair Harvey, and apologies, I'll question through you to the presenter. I've not written down your name, I apologize. Just further to Mayor Nuttall's comment, as we look at the principles and the four principles that are guiding the decision, and we heard that Mayor Nuttall make a very good case for representation by population. When you look at those, when you grade that, is that number 1A and the other ones are kind of subsets, ideally, if we could do these as well? Is that where you land?
Yeah, thanks for the question, again, through the chair. And it's a great question. There's no weighting put to them, right? And that's purposeful because it really depends on the community where we're working. I think the mayor put it quite well. And for context, I'm an urban planner and a land economist. So I also tend to go towards rep by pop because that's my background and that's how my mind works. But we also work with municipal affairs experts who you've all spoken to, Dr. Spicer, who brings that other lens to it, right? Who helps balance this whole perspective out. But to answer your question, I think it really depends on the community. I just did a presentation last night in Loyalist, a municipality of Loyalist. Anyone who's aware of that, they have Amherst Island. They selected an option last night, and they've had this historically where the island is its own ward. It has about 500 people. So in terms of parity, it's around 6% of parity. I have never done a recommendation like that in my life, and I struggled with it. But that place is so unique that council and the public felt extremely strongly that even though it flew in the face of that guiding principle, and some council members spoke quite eloquently about why it shouldn't, ultimately that was determined and selected as an option. Barrie is different, right? And I think, so as the mayor said, it's a very urban place that is growing quite rapidly, that has seen a shift in how that allocation of population exists. And you know, when I talk about Loyalist again as an example, even outside of the island, it had very defined historic places that, you know, are one place now because of amalgamation. Again, Barrie is a little bit different, right? So, you know, put on the spot, like I agree with the sentiment that representation by population has to be a paramount part of this discussion. But I personally, as someone who doesn't live in Barrie, can't tell you what that weighting should be compared to communities of interest. But I think from what we're hearing tonight, we're getting some flavor of what it should be. So I hope that helps give you a little bit of background.
Yeah, it did. Thank you very much. And yeah, I do agree with what you said, and I do agree with Mayor Nuttall. I think when I look at the three options, there were three that were largely successful in that element, and I think happy to proceed with the 2 that Deputy Mayor Thompson has provided, although there's 3 that largely successful in that domain. But I think the message to the community is, to your point, Councillor Congo, is fair. If that is the primary consideration, this is why we're presenting you ones, because we're not going to consider these. Like really, if it doesn't meet representation by population effectively at all, then they really aren't on the council's consideration. So again, not to mislead people that there's a chance they could do this, we're not going to do that. So I think that's a good communication to be fair and transparent with our expectations. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And just before we let the presenter go, is there any other questions from non-members of committee? Great, well, thank you very much for all the work that you and your team have done. I know it was, the interview I had was fairly in-depth, and I was actually quite surprised to see how many variable options were being presented. So thank you for all the work that you and your team have put in, and a lot more work seems to be ahead of you still, so thank you.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the discussion, and we'll see you in a little while.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and with that being said, we'll now deal with the direction to staff as put on the table by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Just to make sure, no further discussion. Okay, thank you. And all those in favor? And that passes.